Welcome to Bear and Balanced. I'm Jeff Berckes. On the wrong side of the screen, because I'm on the wrong side of the world. On the other side of the screen from me, in my usual spot, is Lester A. Wiltfong Jr. Lester, the Chicago Bears are on a 4-game winning streak. I'm not sure I've ever got to say that to you, but greetings. How did you take the game? And man, Bears are just running wild right now.
That was funny. We talked before the season started what the record is of us doing this show for the Bears, and it's pretty bad. So yeah, this is the first ever longer than the 3-game winning streak we've done. I believe it was the Nagy era. That was before our time, right? The Nagy era.
I think so. Yeah, I think we've been doing this show for 5 or 6 years, which I think would have been after the Nagy era. So, a fun game. I'm on the road, if you will. I'm more in the air. You can't get to where I'm at by driving from the U.S. We'll put it that way. And I watched this game very early in the morning in the corner of a hotel room that I'm in right now while my wife was sleeping. And one thing that struck out, I didn't know where else to put it on the show, Lester, was I think there's a little uneasiness that the score was maybe a little closer than what the game felt.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, you got 6 scoring drives. Only 2 of those scoring drives were touchdowns. 4 of them were field goal drives. It's been a little bit of what we've seen so far is that there hasn't been enough conversions of those scoring drives into touchdowns. But, this game really felt like a blowout. I think if you have 3-3, which still isn't a great result in terms of 6 scoring drives, you're at 30 points. You probably don't feel that way anymore. If you have 4-2, which that's a fair result. That's 34 points. That's probably what the game felt like.
Yeah.
34-14. A little bit of mental lapses at the end of the first half, start of the second half. I just think that all of the underlying, information from this game sort of lends this to being a blowout. The end score doesn't look like a blowout, but everything else did. And I just think it's just that ratio of being able to convert drives. And I think it'll get there. They got to stop shooting themselves in the foot with, mental mistakes, offensive penalties, and converting some of these drives. And then getting a little lucky that the refs don't slow them down with their flags, right? So that's I just wanted to make sure we got that up off the top. This really was a blowout. It just didn't necessarily show that in the score.
Yeah, it felt that way most of the game, and they were up 20-0 at one point, and you're like, oh yeah, here we go. It took a while to get there, and it was nice that Ben Johnson, he talked about it, right, in his pressers, how, it's been up and down, the offense, he understands it, he's aware of it, Caleb's aware of it. It's just, they got to fight through some of this adversity that they're going through on offense and kind of clean some things up. And you got to convert these good field positions into touchdowns. 4 turnovers the defense got for them. They had a short field quite a bit. And like you said, they only converted 2. But again, we're 6 games into a new coaching regime, new scheme on both sides of the ball. So, look, I got no complaints where this team's at right now.
Well, let's jump into the categories. Let's not mess around with this. So let's start off with our trench tribute. And Lester's going to be running the board tonight. So make sure that happens for us. So, Lester, I think there's a lot of places to go. I think most guys on the offensive line play pretty well. I think most guys on the defensive line play pretty well, and you can see that in the statistics. So it's kind of like throw a dart, and where do you want to go? But start us off.
I'm going to go with the guy. I don't think we've talked about him yet so far this season, and that is Jonah Jackson. I think he probably had his best game as a Bear. He did pretty good in pass pro. The run game was really good. I mean, it was the entire interior. You could really see those combo blocks. They're running the outside zone stuff, and they're really working up to the second level. And Jonah Jackson was a big part of that. Again, the pass pro was there. The physicality. And Ben Johnson even talked about that after the game, how this was the most physical game the Bears have had this season. And of course, that starts in the trenches, right? And it wasn't just Jonah Jackson. It was Wright. Eggs Benedict had a rough game, but in the run game, he was pretty good. So overall, I thought, like you said, you can go a lot of different directions. I just wanted to make sure we spotlight a guy that hasn't had much love so far this season. That's Jonah Jackson.
I mean, it was the first name I wrote down, so it's nice to know that we're still on the same page here. And if you can get a game where you're running downhill, that's probably pretty good for a big guy like Jonah Jackson. But he's moving in space, and he's going to the second level and picking up blocks, and so he had a good game. And I think early on, a lot of people were like, God, terrible trade, terrible, what are we doing here? You got to trust that these things take a little time, and give these guys the full season before you hand in the full report card. And so I think it's good that we're seeing a little bit more consistency out of this offensive line, a little more consistency out of him in particular. Again, I think you can go anywhere, but they talked about Montez Sweat maybe being under a little bit of additional pressure. Maybe there's some growing, chatter about him not producing up to the contract. He came out right away, set the tone, got the strip sack, started off with the first of the 4 turnovers. He's a good football player, I think, the longer he's in your lineup and healthy, the better you're going to be as a football team. And I just thought him starting things off with the big strip sack really set the tone for the defense for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I think Sweat's a good choice. I do want to mention one other guy in the offensive line, and I had him written down, but I'm like, I really can't give him the Trench tribute just because of some of the issues he did have, and that's center Drew Dahlman. He was a bully in the run game. I mean, he was moving dudes, but he had the couple odd snaps. So I'm like, well, I can't really put him here, but I want to make sure I do mention him. I thought, besides from those goofy snaps, and look, what the hell was going on there? Like, who even knows what happened there? Obviously, it was a cadence issue. Something happened. I saw someone who was at the game said it was pretty loud down in that end zone while the Bears had the ball, which is, Bears fans, let's be better than that. Don't be loud when your team has the ball. That's saved for the other team. So, but I thought Dahlman had a pretty nice game too.
I mean, I don't want to throw Bears fans under the bus, but that is so Bears fans to just be like, yeah,
it's been a while, right?
Hasn't been good. We got to cheer, right? That's what we do. I went to a Broncos game a long time ago when the year that Manning set the league record for most touchdown passes, and they had these graphics that would play all of the time with Manning or the receivers, whatever. They'd have these videos up on the board, and they, shh, offense is on the field, quiet, because Manning, he's going up there and he's changing plays. He's going right down to the last second a lot of times. And, so he needs that quiet to be able to really run his offense, particularly at home when you can do that. And Bears fans, I don't know that they don't know that stuff, right? They never had an offense that functions well. And if the offense is doing well, they're going to cheer. They don't know any better. So maybe there is some education to be had for Bears fans. I didn't know where to put Dahlman either. I think you could put him in the cold bowl of porridge later on in the show because he had multiple issues. I think you could talk about his good. He had a real kind of up and down game. So it's nice to at least make sure we mention him because there was some positive. It wasn't just all negative. All right, well, let's move on to the social media portion of the show, our sweet tweets. Who do you want to start off with?
I'm going to go with a guy by the name of Eli Ong. He is at the Pen of Eli. He writes for WGN. An interesting nugget from Next Gen Stats. Caleb Williams was more effective against the blitz than when not blitzed against New Orleans. Williams completed 7 of 8 passes for 102 yards against the Saints blitz, who brought extra rushers, 28.6% of his dropbacks. We'll talk a lot about Caleb, I'm sure, as we get going here, but that aspect of his game, which has been pretty solid throughout his entire career, against the blitz, that's been a plus. And that's one of the harder things for a young quarterback to get over. One of the harder things for a young quarterback to understand where the blitzers are coming from, because oftentimes the free blitzer is his responsibility, right? There's no one to block him. He has to know it. He has to know where his hots are. And the fact that Caleb, through all the issues in this game, and like I said, we're going to touch on some of those, 7 of 8 against the blitz, which is pretty good for Caleb.
Well, it sure seemed like the Saints sold out on trying to stop the pass. So they were flooding the zone in a lot of ways. They were dropping a lot of guys. And I think that's, that goes hat in hand with the running game being so successful. And I think that if you're the Saints and you're trying to find a way to win this football game, it's a pretty smart way to do it, right? This passing offense has looked pretty good. Let's sell out to try to stop it. They have not been able to run the ball. Let's take the gamble that our guys up front can stop the run and see if we can make this a game. And part of that they succeeded on, right? The numbers weren't very great in the passing game. Obviously these splits they're pretty good for Caleb, but for this side of it, but they really got burned in the run game. right? They were putting light boxes out there, and the Bears took advantage. So that's good football too. That's smart of Ben Johnson being able to adapt and take advantage of that. I think overall, Caleb has shown that he's pretty good against the blitz, and I don't know if it makes the read simpler. If it, some of this might be that escapability where he's able to get out. And we'll get to it when we talk about Caleb directly, but that's one part of the game that once that starts clicking, which we know he has, he has the sack avoidance plays where then he's scrambling. They haven't really connected on anything yet this year. And once he's able to make that happen, then you're going to add this, and you know that he has that in him. You're going to add this layer on top to this offense that we just haven't seen yet. I mean, there's just so many more levels that I think this thing can go.
Yeah, that's a good point. The leveling up, right? I mean, this offense is where they're at now. They're just not there yet, right? But there's some growth here and there. They're just picking things up as they go, and like you said, it's going to click at some point because I don't think Ben Johnson will let it not click. I think he's just a psychopath, and he's going to be all over these guys, and he's going to make sure they get it right at some point. And like I said, it's going to click. It's going to click. You take a look at what happened his first year calling plays in Detroit, and Jared Goff was a very experienced quarterback, right? When Ben Johnson had a hold of him, and even his numbers were low. I mean, compared to where he was in his career early and compared to where he has been since, Goff's numbers have been a bit lower during that time. So it's just one of those things where it'll take a little time. How about you? What was your tweet this week?
So mine came from Justin. He's at Just1700. He said, bizarre game with a lot of nonsense, but the cream rose to the top at the end, I think is what he meant there. That's the sign of a good football team. So I think this goes hat in hand with don't apologize for an ugly win, something that Moose Johnson was saying on the broadcast.
Yeah.
And it's something that we've talked about here. Like, why are Bears fans there's no style points here. Like, this is not like college football 25 years ago where they got to blow out a team, a cupcake team by 70 or else they're going to drop in the rankings. Like, that's not how this works, right? These are professional football teams. These teams, bad teams beat good teams every week. Like, this is not a crazy thing. And, the Saints reporters were talking like, well, we thought this was going to be a game that we could win, right? Like, this is, so you think about the from the Saints perspective, like they thought this was a game that they could win. And you look at some of the underlying numbers of the Saints coming into this game, they weren't terrible, right? They weren't the Jets, right? They weren't some of these other teams that are like, with a similar record. They were playing a little bit more competitive football. So I was a little worried. You had the short week. You had a somewhat emotional win against Washington. It just felt like there was maybe a setup for a trap game. Trap games don't necessarily exist in the NFL, but that's how the narrative works with the media. And it felt like that could have been a possibility. And I just think if you win a football game in professional football, particularly when you dominate on a lot of these different areas, who cares what the final score is? You win the game, you put it in the books, and you move on to the next team. You don't say, man, I wish we would have had more style points and won by 20 instead of 12. I mean, yeah, sure, but who cares at the end of the day? You only get one mark in one tally in the win column for every game. So I thought all the BS that happens in a football game, at the end of the day, the team that played better won. Who cares what the score is?
Yeah, I mean, there are no asterisks, right? I mean, you play who's on your schedule. The Saints were there. Like you said, I mean, the trap game narrative, that was all over the place, right? I mean, that was a big part of this week. You said you already talked about why. The short week, emotional game, in Washington. The weather was a factor. It could have been early. A lot of times the weather is an equalizer, right? If it's a little sloppy during the game. But that didn't really matter for this team. I mean, this team kind of went out there and it took them a while to get going, but, they got going. And again, just like we've seen during this entire 4-game win streak, right? They've overcome some adversity. I mean, we saw it in Dallas, right? That the Cowboys game, they kind of caught up towards the half there and like, oh, here we go again, right? It's going to happen. And then, of course, the two big nice wins, the Raiders, and then, of course, the Commanders. And then again this week, they're up 20-0, but what happens? Here it comes, end of the half. They get a touchdown. They get a touchdown again out of the half. And what are you thinking? Oh, no. Here we go again, right? Same old Bears, but it didn't now. So that's 4 wins, 4 times as a fan base we've thought to ourselves, here we go again, same old Bears, and 4 times it didn't happen. So I think it's at some point we're going to realize this is not the same old Bears.
And this 4-2 feels a lot better than the 4-2 last year. I'm gonna go right out. So I would say that. All right, well, let's move on to the caught up in a numbers game stat of the week. I'll let you kick this one off. What do you have?
So I've had a couple of weeks where I've talked about the run defense, which has been previous to the bye horrendous, right? They were the worst in the league, and they're still among the worst in the league. But my number this week is 3.5, and that's yards per carry. That's what they've given up since the bye, right? So the Commanders came into that game the best running team in the NFL. Bears did a number against them. This last game, 44 yards is all they gave up on the ground. So they were averaging a ton. They're still among the worst, but they've whittled that number down to just 5.3 on the season. And again, these last 2 weeks, 3.5 yards per carry. Look, I don't know what's going on and why it's been so effective. Obviously, Dennis Allen went back in the lab and realized we've got to change some things here. There's some moves they had to make, but they're playing good football. They're stopping the run, and that's what matters right now because, it's still a lot of teams are trying to establish that run here, and the Bears are shutting that down.
Well, a new defensive coordinator who we're really excited about, who I'm going to talk about in a second. And then, you've had injuries to start the year, and you got Edwards coming back from injury. That's a big piece of that run game. He's obviously a positive in that part of it, but it's just part of playing to the specifications of what Dennis Allen is expecting, and that is not only against the pass, but it's against the run. And you hope that this defense is also trending up. They've been doing one thing really well, which I'm going to get to in my number here, but I think there's other things that they can improve on, but part of that's health and part of that's playing together. And, we talked about that offensive line playing together and how important that is. What about the secondary being healthy and playing together? That's important, right? Well, we know we don't have Jalen Johnson for the rest of, or probably for most of the year. So those new guys getting those starting reps, like that's important. Tyreek Stevenson went down with an injury in this game. Is he going to miss some time? Well, who's the next man up here? And so you get these guys that haven't played much or any together. It takes a little time to understand how to pass those guys off, right? So, you got to give a little grace for a new regime and new players coming in and playing with each other. And that's what you're seeing in the run game too. Hopefully that's coming together. And like you said, the Commanders are good at running the football. So if you were able to limit them, that's a really big positive. I don't know where the Saints ranked, but Alvin Kamara's no slouch, and they've got that Taysom Hill, who I did not know was still in the league, collecting a huge paycheck for 3 touches a game. Good for him. Yeah. But all right, so my stat of the week is 11. That is the Bears' turnover differential is nice. Plus 11 right now. That's best in the league. They have 16 takeaways. That's best in the league. They have 5 giveaways, which is tied for 5th best in the league. So if you're the best at the ratio, that's an amazing thing. But like you're best at taking the ball away, and you're one of the best at preventing those giveaways. That's amazing. That's why they're winning football games, is because they're stealing possessions and they're not giving any possessions away. But I went back for the last 20 years, the best total turnover differential for this team. So all 16 games or 17 games, depending on what year. For the Chicago Bears, their best turnover differential was plus 20 in 2012. Their second best was plus 12 in 2018. And so the Bears are already at a plus 11, only 6 games into this thing. So they have almost 2/3 of a year to add to that plus 11, and they could scream right past that plus 20, right? They've got some tougher games on the schedule. I'm not going to say it's possible. I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but it's certainly possible, right? That they could be looking at a turnover differential, the likes of which we haven't seen in a very long time, maybe ever, right? And part of that's because I think Caleb Williams does a good job of taking care of the ball. And we talked about this like a few times now, but on the one hand, you can't count on turnovers to happen every game, right? They're a little bit fluky, what have you. But on the other hand, we've talked about this, I think, more than anybody, which is Dennis Allen has an attacking style. And they brought it up on the broadcast, and I was really glad that it's like, yeah, everybody preaches this. Everybody talks about, hey, we practice this. We talk about taking the ball away, whatever. But Dennis Allen goes in with a plan. Like, he sees a weakness and he tries to exploit it, right? Like, hey, they like to throw this quick slant. You need to jump it. And so, if he's giving his guys cues and saying, go after it, that's leading to some of these turnovers. And so I don't think it's crazy that this team is built for long-term success because of the coordinators. Because Ben Johnson is all about, he's going to bully in the run game. He's going to create explosive plays, which is a big deal. And he's going to make sure Caleb's taking care of the ball as part of his offensive scheme. And Dennis Allen's going to take it away. And that is going to lead to a lot of wins for your football team. Those are two mentalities that we just have not seen in Chicago in a long time. And you pair them together, and this is the kind of football that I like to watch. And my favorite football team is going to play it. It's really exciting.
We just had 3 years of a guy that preached getting the ball, right? And it just didn't translate, right? I think part of it's the way you're coached. I think part of it is just a mentality. Like you said, it's a very physical violence, brand of football that Dennis Allen has always coached. And look, we have talked about this in the past, how, you always, you can't count on turnovers, right? It's not something you can count on year to year. Now, those Lovie Smith Bears, those peanut punch Bears, they count on every year because that was ingrained into the culture of that defense. So yeah, like you said, with Dennis Allen, he's not leaving Chicago anytime soon. I mean, he's had a couple stints as a head coach, right? And he's here now, and Al Harris, and there's a good group of defensive coordinator or defensive assistants on the staff, and they are preaching it. They are all together. Jaquan Brisker was at his press conference earlier today. He was kind of talking about the difference in the two coaching staffs, and they just feel like the players and coaches are in line. He didn't take any shots at the previous regime, but the way he was talking about this current coaching staff, it's different. I mean, you could just feel it. I mean, we could see it as fans watching this thing going on here. We knew Ben Johnson coming in was going to make things different. Dennis Allen, I think he's having just as big of an impact on that defense as Ben Johnson is having on that offense.
Absolutely. Well, let's flip it back around and talk about Caleb here in Caleb's corner. So, for those of you that are wanting to glass half full and be like, yeah, sure, they won, but, or maybe this was the old school Bears. So old throwback win, defense and running the football, right? Caleb was 15 to 26, 172 yards. He had no touchdowns and 1 interception. He had only one sack for an 8-yard loss. So again, a light week of work for you in sack watch. He had 4 carries for -2 yards. 2 of those were kneel downs. Those are good. Those are good rushes. The kneel downs at the end of the game. I had a note that, when I went back and watched, 15 and 26. That's not a lot of attempts to begin with. There are a number of avoided sacks. He gets out and scrambles and he fires a bullet downfield. They're just not hitting right now. Those will hit. I have no doubt. We've seen it happen. It's going to get locked in. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. There was an absolute just dart that was tagged on. It hit off the helmet of the Saints defender in the end zone because he clearly didn't know it was coming. DJ's not running a competitive route in that he doesn't ever look back for the football. And so that's why the defender never looks back to the football, because he's guarding DJ Moore, right? But that's a good ball. And if DJ is, aware and has his eyes back to the quarterback, that's a touchdown. And so there's just some plays where that looks like a bad throw. And it's well, was it, right? That one in particular, there was a ball downfield to Rome that you believe Rome's going to come up with a contested catch in some of these situations, and he's not. So there's a little bit of lost yardage. And then there's just some stuff that they're all the right decisions. It's just that it's a little bit inaccurate at this point. And so if we're still talking about this next year at this time, then that's who Caleb is, right? But we're still 6 weeks into this new offense. He's doing so many things right. I think a lot of the decision making has been correct. he's got the sack avoidance at a high level, which last year he took the most sacks in the league. And almost, whatever, set the record, or was close to the record, whatever it was. Yeah. And now he's has sack avoidance at a level that's ranks in the top 5 or 7 or whatever it is in the league. So I look at the numbers and I'm like, bad game. And then you go back and watch the game and you're like, yeah, there's a few things that are unfortunate, but overall they sold out to stop the pass and the run game was really working and they didn't need Caleb to do much. I'm not too worried.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like a lot of the criticism on social media about his game was, same old Caleb. That's the same guy he was last year, trying to do too much. And look, I think he got kind of caught up in something where he was trying to go for a big play a few times. But like you said, his sack avoidance, I think last year, I forget what site it was, one of these analytics sites, and I've talked about it in the show before. I think they had him down for like 50 sacks that he personally avoided. Like he saved the sack because of his scrambling ability. And look, that's still in his game. He's got that. Ben Johnson talked about it. You said you want him to do that. You want him to make these ridiculous plays where he just evades the sack, because eventually those will lead to bigger plays. And even Caleb talked about it himself. He said some of those plays he probably should have ran a little bit. He's got to find a balance of when to run. And look, I went back and watched it today. There were a few times where I'm like, yeah, instead of trying to rifle that pass in for a gain, he could have just took off and got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yards. Right. Sometimes that's the smart play. I saw others saying, okay, he missed a couple checkdowns. Well, there were a few times where I went back and watched the play, and you're like, well, did he miss the check down, or was the pressure just kind of in his field of vision? He is a shorter guy, so sometimes that up the middle pressure is going to get to him a little bit. He's got to make a move where he doesn't really have the right arm angle to make a play. And that's kind of why he spins out of there a few times, where you think, well, he probably could have hung tight and made a throw, but he's not going to throw over the top of a 6'6" defensive tackle coming in on him. So we got to get used to what Caleb's going to do. And look, this is part of the growing of the offense. Ben's learning what he can do, but Ben, every step of the way, Ben has said he does not want to take that out of Caleb's game. So is Caleb getting better in the pocket? Yes. Are his feet more aligned with his drops? Yes. Is he seeing things on his first reads? Yes. I think some of the criticism, look, whenever he has a bad game, those fans will come out, right? Those critics will come out because they want this to be what it was. I didn't see that, what I saw last year. I still see him on time. Yeah, sometimes the first read wasn't there, so he had to scramble. Sometimes the pressure got on a little too quick, so he had to scramble. He'll learn. Ben will learn. Caleb's going to have to just take off and make a few plays with his feet. Look, coming out of high school, he was the top-rated quarterback, not only as a thrower, he was the top-rated, I forget what they call him, the runner-passer. I think that's the high school term. Dual threat. I think that's the dual threat. He was that guy. We seen him last year. He set the Bears rookie record for yards by a quarterback, rushing yards. He has that in him. He doesn't want to run. He wants to throw it and get the ball in his playmaker's hands. But sometimes it's not there. You got to just take what defense gives you, run the ball.
Yeah, and kudos to the Saints for some disciplined pass rushing too, right? So sometimes it's very obvious where those rushing lanes are as a quarterback if you have guys that aren't very disciplined in their pass rush, because it just the C's opened up. There's the middle of the field. It's a gift 10 yards. Quarterback takes off, right? Even like a Joe Flacco at 40 years old or whatever, you give a guy a lane like that, they can gain a few yards, right? Like that's, but I think it was Granderson, whoever their defensive end was, kept spinning out on the block on the right as Caleb kept trying to get around him to the right. That's disciplined pass rushing. He's not trying to sack him necessarily. He is trying to contain him. And you can see a team that's trying to keep the quarterback in the pocket rather than trying to get the sack. And there was a couple plays where they did a really nice job of that. And Caleb's trying to extend. They've got 7 guys in coverage, covering the 4 guys out in the route or whatever it is. The numbers are on their side. No one's breaking open. He's trying to buy time, throw it away, right? That's not a bad play. That's the right. He's being creative. He's doing good things. It's an 0 for 1 on the stat sheet, right? That's a lot better than a sack. It's a lot better than other negative, negative plays that can happen, a pick, whatever, right? Caleb obviously got frustrated once and forced the play in, and they got intercepted. Are you worried about that? I'm not particularly worried about a guy that's thrown like 10 interceptions a year and a half into his career. Like, he seems to be a guy that kind of gets it and takes care of the ball. Like, it's not a problem for me yet, right? And one of those picks was Max Crosby being insane, right? So I'm not too worried about Caleb Williams protecting the ball at this point. But yeah, overall, I'm not. He's falling behind the 4,000-yard pace. Who cares? Like, let's see what the next game is. Oh, they had positive game script. That's the other thing. They had positive game script, so there's no catch up, cheat passes at the end where he's just padding stats or anything like that. They're trying to work the clock, and the running game was working. So that's why he only had 26 attempts. So I don't know. I'm not too worried. And it's a win. Like, don't don't wring your hands because when your football team won comfortably.
That was a comfortable win. It wasn't the best from Caleb, but the running game and the offensive line picked him up. The defense picked him up. I mean, that's what you want to see, right? We've seen these during this winning streak. Special teams has made some plays. Defense made some plays. Caleb's made some plays. The running game made some plays. So, it's inconsistent, but it's coming around, and they're in a good place right now as a football team.
All right, well, we're going to do the three bears, but before that, Lester has a quick message from our friends at DraftKings.
I do. NFL fans, what is your favorite touchdown? For me, it's the next one, because with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official betting partner of the NFL, every touchdown could bring you closer to cashing in. From first touchdown score to anytime touchdown props or the thrill of live in-game betting, every snap is loaded with opportunity. Look, the last I checked, the Bears-Ravens, it's a tough game. The Ravens were favored, I think, by 5.5 the last I checked. And, of course, these odds and lines are subject to change at any time. But, that's a pretty decent number. And look, that was based on Lamar Jackson possibly playing. Right now, he's missed practice, so that's up in the air. So if you like that number, it may be a good time to jump on that. So, and here's the best part about DraftKings right now is new customers, you bet $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get a $300 in bonus bets instantly. Like, I use the DraftKings app, and you should too. It's a good time. So if your team's hitting pay dirt, it pays out to you. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use our code GridironPod. That's code GridironPod for new customers to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, helps Vail for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, pass-through of per wager tax may apply in Illinois. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Maximum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. This is a limited time offer. Whew.
Well done, sir. All right, quick break. Other side, three bears. All right, Lester, let's talk about this. I hope you cooked up a big pot of hot porridge because we can go just about anywhere. I'm going to let you start off. I have so many names written down, so we will try to limit the hot bowl of porridge section so that we don't go, 2 hours.
I mean, this was a big win, right? The running game was awesome. The offensive line was awesome. The defensive line had a great job. The 4 sacks, 4 turnovers. I mean, this is one of those things where you're like, man, you can go in a lot of different directions. But in the spirit of the hot bowl, I'm going rookie Kyle Monangai, who had the best game as a pro for him. And look, he was running like we want to see him run. You need that good complement to Swift. Swift is obviously your home run threat, and Monangai coming out of Rutgers was like, he's more of a bruiser kind of guy, and that's what we kind of saw. 13 carries, 81 yards, got his first touchdown as a pro, had a nice little celebration there. 6.2 yards per carry, plus he had 2 catches and 13 yards in the passing game. And I'm going to mention his blitz pickup. I mentioned it on the broadcast, but in college, he was a very good in the blitz pickup. This is why we all thought, okay, he's going to see the field a little quicker than most rookie running backs. He struggled early, right? For whatever reason, maybe he didn't have his technique down. Maybe he wasn't ready for the leverage. Maybe he had to wait for the speed of the game to catch up to him. But I think his blitz pickup's getting better. So Kyle Monangai, if he can be that guy that complements Swift moving forward, that really opens up this running game to a lot of success.
If I had $1 for every text message I got from my best friend that said "feed Monangai," I think I could afford dinner tonight. Like, I mean, there's just, you know, there's some enthusiasm here, but he runs hard. Like you said, the blitz pickups, a couple of them were impressive for any running back. Like Stonewall and defensive ends, like that's good stuff, right? He's one of the names I wrote down. I wanted to make sure we talked about him in this space because he hasn't had that game yet. I think we've all been kind of hoping and wanting that to happen because, you know, we need to see more than just DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift came out of the bye and is like, oh, you guys don't think I'm an RB1? Here we go, right? Part of that's the offensive line starting to play better together. Part of that is Ben Johnson. You know, he knows who DeAndre Swift is. He had him in Detroit as well. Is starting to say, okay, like we're gonna have you run these runs that we know you do well, right? Like a lot of his success is going to be in space on the outside. He's not going to probably have a lot of positive plays inside the tackle box, right? It's just not who he is as a runner. But Monangai sure seems like he can pick up the slack there, right? So that's a pretty good 1-2 combination if Monangai can be that guy. And who cares if he was drafted in the 7th round, right? No one's talking about Bill on the other side, you know, being like, well, he's not very good because he's a 7th round running back. He was 12 picks after Monangai. This was a historically deep running back draft. A lot of these, you know, Bill and Monangai might have been 4th round picks in a different draft because they may have been pushed up the board based on supply and demand. You have 25 running backs that were taken in that draft. Not everybody can be taken in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd. Right? You know what I mean? Like, hey, we already took a running back. We don't need another one, right? So it is what it is. Who cares about draft position? He has an opportunity in front of him. He's starting to make the most of it. It's good for the Bears, right? Like and maybe that the early bye week was important to get a lot of guys healthy. It's also important for those rookies to take a breath and be able to say, okay, like, you know, I survived that first month. Here we go. Monangai might have benefited quite a bit, and we'll see if the Bears running game can continue going forward against teams that may be a little stiffer against the run here. All right, I texted you this.
You did, yeah. I was ready for you.
This before we saw the video from the Bears locker room, and I said my hot bowl of porridge is going to Dennis Allen. And I think we did a pretty good job of talking about how excited we were about Dennis Allen. I put out a tweet like early. I was like, you know, did we not talk enough about this? And then there was like 14 points given up, and I was like, okay, we talked enough about it. And then they clamped back down. I'm like, all right, we're back in the celebrating of Dennis Allen. But my reason was what we talked about at the top of the show, with like, this is the type of attacking style defense that I like to watch as a fan. And I'm really happy that it's back, you know, doing some of this 85 at 40 work. That Buddy Ryan defense was just like crazy attacking style defense. A lot of this stuff would just be outlawed in today's game. Of course, like you can't hit like those guys did back then, but there's a little bit of that DNA in there in terms of just like, you know, we are just going to take the ball away from you. Right. And this was really this was his revenge game, right? He was the head coach of this of the Saints for the last few years. You know, it wasn't a very popular head coach. You know, from his time in New Orleans, is from what I understand. But who cares, man? Like, he seems like he's very happy in Chicago. And this is, look, man, look at Vic Fangio. You know, look at Buddy Ryan. You can be a star. You can be a hero in the city of Chicago as a defensive coordinator. He's had 2 opportunities to be a head coach, and they have not gone well. He's probably not going anywhere for a while, or ever, right? Like he might just be here for the long run. There are a lot of successful offensive head coaches that find their guy on defense. You know, look at Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo in Kansas City. They find their guy, and they have a good partnership. And again, you don't want to get ahead of yourself, but this has the potential to be a long-term partnership where, you know, Dennis Allen's a creative defensive play caller. And they're going to win some games because Dennis Allen has a really good game plan and puts his defensive players in a position to succeed. This felt like one of those. And the thing I wanted to drive home, if you haven't seen it, go check out the Bears website or their Twitter account and check out when Ben Johnson gives the game ball to Dennis Allen and the way that those defensive players reacted. They are in. They are bought into what he's. And why are they bought in? It's because he's putting them in a position to make plays. That's what these defensive players care about. Put me in a position to do what I do best so that I can go out and I can show out and I can then eventually get paid, right? Like that's what this, they want to be successful. And if your defensive coordinator is putting them in that position time and time again, they're going to be loved. And I'm already seeing some really positive stuff out of the players' reaction to Dennis Allen.
Yeah, you talk about the players. I mean, like I mentioned Brisker's press conference earlier in the show, and he talked about it. They are in better position to succeed, and he talked about how much when Dennis Allen got that game. But like I said, if you haven't seen that video, make sure you go see it. The Bears put it on all their socials. You know, they were fired up for their D coordinator. I mean, they were jumping up and down in the circle with. They were hugging him. You know, Ben Johnson was just kind of off to the side, just kind of smiling. He knows, right? He knows what he's got built here with this coaching staff. And like you said, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but that's what you want. You know, you want to keep some of your guys intact that you know you're going to be here for the long haul. And he's got a couple failed head coaching stints on the resume. No one's going to come calling for Dennis Allen. It's unfortunate, but that's just kind of how it is throughout the league. You know, sometimes a guy has a couple chances and they don't get another shot. You know, he may somewhere down the road, it may happen, who knows. But the way things look right now, this is going to be a Ben Johnson, Dennis Allen show for the next several years. And the players love it. You know, they love his style. It's an attacking style, but he's also very versatile. I don't know if anyone caught Taylor Dowell's Making Monsters, her preview. She had the Saints beat writer on, I believe it was Ross Jackson, talking about how Dennis Allen, when he was in New Orleans, he was very versatile. You know, that's something that they talked about prior to the season. And we really saw that happen in the Commanders game. You know, they wanted Jaden Daniels to throw the ball. They took away the run. They played a lot of single high safety, you know, and they wanted to make, you know, Jaden Daniels do it with his arm because they had to stop that run. And they did. And here it is against Rattler. They heated Rattler up. They got after him. And look, Rattler's a young player. He had some moments in the game, but 3 turnovers, the fumble, the 3 picks and the fumble. So they were all over him. And that's what you want to do with a young quarterback is go after him. And, you know, Brisker talked about it, a lot of various looks. You know, they show different things up front. They want to make sure that the opposing quarterback doesn't know who's coming. And we've seen some zone blitz stuff where Javon Dexter's dropping into coverage and Dale Odengo's dropping back. And, you know, those things, you know, the Flus era kind of ruined us for that because whenever he did it, it didn't work, it seemed. Like, why is Andrew Billings dropping in coverage? It seemed like it wasn't going to work out. But when it works, I love the zone blitz because the quarterback doesn't expect it. You don't expect your guy dropping back. And Dexter almost had a pick early in the game. You know, like, how cool would that have been to have a big, thick pick 6 for the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, that will lead the show when that happens, right? The only other name that I just want to make sure we mention, I think we could mention 5 or 6 and be justified in doing so, but I just wanted to say Tremaine Edmonds had a sack. That was just all athleticism. Such a nice play out of him. You know, he had the interception to kind of, ice the game, I should say, and then 2 pass defenses to his credit. You know, he's playing better football than he has since he became a Chicago Bear. He makes a lot of money, and that's always going to be something that people talk about and care about. I don't think Eberflus did a very good job of using him. He definitely seemed like he was a bit of a waste in terms of, especially when you trade away Roquan Smith and then go ahead and give a lot of that money to Tremaine Edmonds. It's like, well, okay, but like, why? Why would you do that, particularly if he's not going to be productive? You know, Dennis Allen, he's a different coach. He's got different ideas on how to use an athletic player like that. and I think he's playing the best football of his Bears career right now, and he had an outstanding game. So I want to make sure we mention him. Let's flip it around. Let's talk about Cole Bull again. This was dominant performance, but there is still some space here. Who did you identify for this?
We talked a little bit about Caleb earlier, but I want to point out one more thing about Caleb. So I talked about in my tweet of the week from Eli Ong how he talked about the good, right? The blitz, how good he was, 7 of 8. Here's the flip side. He also tweeted this out as well. Caleb was just 8 of 18 for 70 yards with a pick on his non-blitz dropbacks. Caleb was pressured on 45% of those non-blitz dropbacks, and when pressured, Williams was just 2 of 10 for just 40 yards. So we talked about it. The pressure came. He tried to scramble. 5 or 6 times he got outside the pocket, and instead of running, he tried making a play with his arms, and those didn't connect. He talked about how those will connect eventually. It didn't work out this week. So we got to give Caleb at least one cold bowl this week, because it was it's probably his worst game of the year.
Yep, totally fine with that. I don't think we need to dwell on it too much. I think that once it's not a negative play. Like you've avoided the sack, right? So that's a negative play that you've avoided. You're out in the open, and there was at least once where there was a spy, and so that is what it is. That they've that's the defense. He can't scramble there. I think he's going to start picking up those 5, 6, 10 years. He's athletic. Like he can get a first down with his legs, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if he takes off a little more often, or maybe waits until he sees a more open receiver on some of those plays. But also, like, he's got the arm to fit it in there. Like there's just something. It doesn't make sense that they haven't connected enough here. Like he's going to start making teams pay when that happens. He's going to get outside the pocket, and he's going to connect there. So I'm not really worried about it, but it just something isn't computing. Like it doesn't seem like that equation works quite yet. I was just going to say Eggs Benedict. He had some penalties. He got worked, against a professional defensive end. He's outmatched. Particularly, he has shorter arms, and so if you're going to have short arms at left tackle, your feet better be amazing. And sometimes you're just going to get beat. And I think Ben Johnson knows that. I think he knows that that's going to be the weak link of that offensive line. He's going to, have to rely more on the other 4 offensive linemen to be able to handle their blocks, solo. I mean, Darnell Wright is never going to get help in this offensive scheme, right? Like he's always going to be on an island on his own, but he's proven to be one of the best in the league. That I'm not worried about Darnell Wright, but right now, Eggs is definitely the weak link, and you love his fire, you love his passion, you love how he can get after it, particularly in the run game. But when you play, a former number 1 overall pick who's got all of the size, length, speed, whatever measurables, even if he hasn't had a super successful career so far, he's still a good football player. And has those abilities. Those are going to be challenging for him, right? Like he's going to have his hands full when he plays, freaky defensive ends. He's going to have his hands full when he plays really talented players. So we'll see how he does. But this is going to be an issue that we're going to have to be talking about all year.
Yeah, I mean, it's the left tackle is always going to be the weak link, right? Because Braxton was coming off the injury. They were possible talking about Ozzy Trapilla going to the left side, who was a rookie, and it ended up being Benedict, right? No one expected this to happen. So now you're on your I forgot to mention Karan Amangaji, right? He was in the mix for a while there. So yeah, your left tackle spot was always going to be a problem. You knew you had the interior, bulked up from the trades and free agency. Darnell Wright's a stud. You knew you'd be fine over there. So no matter what happened going into the season, Ben Johnson knew he'd have to scheme around his left tackle. So nothing new, just a different person there now. So yeah, I think he'll be fine. Running the ball like this will help though, right? Because that's what Eggs likes to do. He wants to get after you in the run game. He's a much better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. So if the Bears can kind of keep imposing their will, that's going to help that O-line altogether, and including Benedict.
No one likes cold eggs. That's what I'm saying. All right, let's hit the Just Right Bowl here. I only had one name written down, so I'm going to go first because I'm hoping that we're going to steal it. So I'm going to say Byard here. He had a pick. He had almost had a second one. It was broken up by his own teammate, Nashon Wright. I thought that was a funny play. It is funny because the Bears win and he didn't need it, but you certainly would have loved to have seen him get another one. It was a bad throw. It was a turnover-worthy play. He certainly deserved to get another pick there if he was able to corral that and not have it broken up. But this is what we expect from him. He's a good football player. He has the nose for the football. You know, I don't think I'm violating too much here, but, you know, our friend Bill Zimmerman kind of floated the idea like, man, is he going to get an extension here? And I don't think that's a crazy idea to see if they can, like, add another year onto the end of that contract. I know he's older. You know, you may not want to invest in too many older players, but the safety position is a position that's, you know, really relies on instincts more than it does like corner, right? Like if you lose any of that speed at corner, you're starting to get in trouble, right? You lose a little bit of your speed and athleticism as a safety, that's a little different because it's a lot based on instincts. So I'm not as worried about the age thing with a guy like Byard. And if the Bears wanted to go ahead and keep him around because, you know, he's a captain, he's a veteran, he's a really good football player, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good player. He's 32. Like you said, he's at that age now where, you know, the drop-off's going to happen at some point. But we're talking about a guy that's been relatively healthy his entire career. He doesn't miss games. He plays a lot of football, you know, and that could be a plus or minus. Okay, there's you know, he's done a lot out there, so maybe his body will wear down. But also there's no injuries. There's no major injuries to worry about. So I think with a guy like Bayard, he's just, like you said, the football IQ is top of the charts. I mean, he understands who to see him back there, team captain, the leadership. I think if there's a deal on the table to be made, you know, I think that's something you want to do. And I'm looking at Pro Football Reference. Did you know his nickname? The mayor of Murfreesboro is his nickname.
I love it. I love it because like that's the kind of, I mean, the mayor's a guy that's like likable, good guy. Everybody, you know, that makes a lot of sense. What do you got?
So for me, I'm going to go. Look, rookie tight ends take some time. They don't all come out and then they're just studs off the bat. We're seeing the guy in the Colts who the Bears could have drafted. Every time he makes a play, social media blows up. Oh my God, the Bears took the wrong tight end. The Bears took the wrong tight end. They should have took Warren from Penn State. Look, he's having a good year. Colson Levin's having a pretty good year. He had a slow start, obviously, with the injury. You know, he missed parts of training camp. He had an injury this year also already with the hip. But he's a pretty good football player. The receiving part of his game is going to be there. I don't think fans realize how good of a blocker he was. And I didn't realize how good of a blocker he was at first when the Bears made the pick. But you go back and you watch film in Michigan, not this last year's film because he had the shoulder injury he was nursing most of the year. The year prior, he is a pretty damn good blocker, right? He has good technique. We saw it on display in the game against the Saints. He pancaked the guy that's 20 pounds heavier than him in the game. He had him and he turned him and he put him on his ass. It was like you don't expect that out of a Bears tight end. It hasn't happened. You know, that's not to knock Cole Kmet. That's just we haven't seen someone that's really take advantage of it. That was George Kittle-esque, right? That kind of block he made right there on the edge. We saw him make a few others. I kind of went back and watched the film last night, and his blocking made a difference in this running game. And I think that's going to happen moving forward. And look, the receptions will come. You know, he had, I think, 3 catches in the game. One of them was on a sideline, a nice kind of grab there. He caught the 4th down pass on a nice route he run to get himself open. I'm not worried about Colson Loveland. He is right where he should be as a rookie tight end in this offense. And a big game will come at some point. But in the meantime, stop trying to compare him to the other guy. The Bears got a pretty good football player at 10 overall in Colson Loveland.
Well, and let's just make the point. I don't have my notes in front of me, and I'm in a bad position to be able to fact check myself in real time. But generally, when you take a younger player, they take a little bit more time. They're not maybe quite ready to make that instant impact. But if you take a guy that's been around college football for a little longer, you know, 4th-year senior, 5th-year senior in some circumstances, those guys generally, like, they're closer to their athletic ceiling. They've played more football. They're closer to making an impact right away. And so you see it time and time again where a lot of the rookies that make the biggest impact in the league, they're older rookies. But then what does their career look like? You know, that ceiling, they may have reached their ceiling a little earlier than some of these other guys. not to go back to the Caleb conversation, but Caleb and Drake May were the younger guys coming out of that class. And, the older guys that have been around football for a while, the, Nix and Penix and of course, Jaden Daniels, those guys all were able to come in and play pretty good football right away. And Jaden Daniels played great as a rookie, right? But your career is not judged by your rookie season. Your career is judged by your career. And your career definitely is, your draft pick, I think, is judged in large part by your rookie contract. And so let's revisit that in a couple of years and see what these guys look like. And, maybe they're both going to be really good football players and both teams are happy with what they got and, great, right? But there's no sense in people were doing that week 1, week 2. I could have had Tyler Warren. And it's like, I don't know, man. I'd like to see what Colson Loveland can do in his first 4 years as a Bear. That's what I'm looking for, because that's your investment. Your investment is the rookie contract. When you give them the extension, then you're investing in them for the peak of their career, right? But you're investing in these guys for the first 4 to 5 years of their career when you draft them. Usually, you don't see a lot of high-level guys cut early because you know that you may draft and develop, right? So I agree with you. When he pops off the screen, he's got playmaking ability. He's been called a couple times for penalties. The one that he got called for this week was ridiculous.
Just as stupid as the one last
penalty. Yeah, the last week was the extension, right? That is what it is. He's got to just learn to be a little bit more savvy with that. But this week, he gets called because a defender's out of place and trips over near him. It was it reminded me a lot of the snatch trap call that they had on Darnell Wright against the Vikings in week 1, where I think somebody just saw it out of the corner of their eye and they threw the flag because, that guy clearly held him, or that guy clearly picked him. And that's not what happened, right? And so if you don't see it, I don't think you should be able to call it. And that was that play, that Loveland got called for that would have been a first down to Swift. Instead, they're behind the sticks. Caleb forces the ball. That was the interception, right? I'm not saying the interception doesn't happen or an interception doesn't happen, but the sequence of plays is a lot different if you're first down on, past midfield after that Swift play. So games are weird, context for all these things. I think Colson Loveland's going to be a good football player. I'm not worried about him.
To your point, I looked it up, and Colson Loveland just turned 21 in the spring. Tyler Warren is 2 years older. He just turned 23 in the spring. So, yeah, you got a guy who's 2 years younger. So, in theory, you should get two more years of the prime of a Loveland than you are to Warren. But look, I'm like you, though. I think they both are very good football players. And I think that – look, I love the tight end position. Besides O-line, I love watching tight ends play. And I'm going to enjoy watching Colson Loveland's career in Chicago.
We talked about it many times that I was a quarterback in an offensive lineman's body, but honestly, always would have liked to have played tight end, right? I can catch the ball pretty well, just not very fast. My ability would have never played even at the high school level from that perspective. But all right, well, fun show, 4 in a row. Thank you to Taylor for filling in for me last week. We are very close to getting back to normal setup, where I will be back in my office. You will be back in your office here soon. So we're close. Thanks for sticking with us on all of that stuff. Maybe we'll stick around for just a couple minutes for any questions. But for those of you listening on the podcast, thank you so much for tuning in. Bears 4-2. Hopefully good things are ahead. We'll check you next time. Bear down. All right, what do you got? I can't see the comments.
There's 2 games going on right now. So the Monday night are already kicked off. But our guy Andrew Fitzpatrick, Nation Wright has been an underrated signing this year. Yeah, I did a radio spot this morning with one of my regular guys, and I talked to Wright a little bit because he had a rough patch. He had a nice, obviously, first week 1, then some rough moments. But yeah, he's been pretty good. I mean, you look at what he's done filling in there. He's starting cornerback. And where he came from, practice squad guy, I didn't expect anything of Nation Wright when the Bears picked him up in the offseason. And then somehow he got his way into some starting reps. Obviously, he had some injuries, so he was filling in. but then he kind of just kept rolling, right? And Nahshon Wright is he fits this defense pretty well, what they want to do. And look, he's not got a couple picks, so a lot of yards in return. He makes the pick, he pops up, look to make a play.
Highs are super high, lows are pretty low, right? I mean, it's a roller coaster. That's fine, right? Because you're giving up big plays, but you're getting big plays. Generally, you'll take that. So as long as he continues to be a playmaker, I don't know that you're going to get rid of the negatives, right? He's just going to get beat sometimes. That's why he's not like a high level corner. But if he's willing to continue to be aggressive, he should have had another one. I can't remember the pass, but you could tell he didn't trigger on it. Not in this game, in a different game. You could tell he didn't trigger on it, and he made the tackle. But you could just tell he was like, it was a pick six. It was just sitting there for him, right? So if he continues to be aggressive, you can look past some of the big plays he's going to give up. A lot of the explosive plays that the Bears have given up, and they haven't given up a ton. They're not crazy, but the ones that have given up, he's been on the receiving end of a lot of those. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster for Nahshon, but overall, he's going to be important to this team going forward.
Yeah, let's do one more. It's a little loud here, and you're halfway across the world sometimes. So let's go one more here. Chris has a good point. The thing with Warren and Loveland is ridiculous because he'd be targeted just as much as Loveland if he were in that offense. Yeah, I mean, Loveland is who he is at this point. He's your starting tight end along with Cole Kmet when you're running the double tight end set. But you got Rome, you got Swift, you got DJ, right? You got Luther, you got Zacchaeus. It's a pretty stacked offense full of weapons, so you're not really featuring any one guy in Loveland, but the Colts, they're featuring Warren quite a bit over there. And look, the Colts
feature Loveland if they took Loveland and said they were taking a tight end. They were taking a tight end.
Yeah. The Colts offense is fun. I mean, that's a fun team to watch right now. I'm not sure if it is sustainable, but that's pretty cool. It's a cool story. Daniel Jones coming back. Like I said, I like tight end. I like watching Warren play. So it's fun seeing what they do over there. Plus, I got DeForest Buckner on my fantasy dynasty team, and he's been killing it for me over there. So that's also a good bonus there.
You're crazy to have defensive players in fantasy, but I love it.
Dynasty. It's the dynasty leagues.
And dynasty, right? That's amazing to me. All right, well. We'll keep it short because, like you said, it's loud and I'm on my phone halfway across the world, so probably shouldn't soak up too much data here. So, all right, well, thanks everybody for joining us again. We'll be back to normal here. Big game against the Ravens. Bears can pull this off. People are going to start talking, right? That's so far. I think the narrative hasn't really shifted yet. So the national narrative about the Bears, but you beat the Ravens in Baltimore, people are going to start talking. So that'll be fun.
Let's do even without Lamar Jackson. I think that's still it's still a Harbaugh coach team. They got a good rushing attack.
They're coming off their bye.
Harbaugh's the best, 13-4 off his bye. So
he's amazing. Yep,
that'll be a big win if they can pull that off.
All right. Well, you push the button, close us out, and we'll see you guys next week.